All right, so we're starting with Unit 4. This is Incident Response. Module 9. Right. So looks like we're starting with cybersecurity today. Significant gaps in cybersecurity exist despite the presence of well-established processes for protection. Only 30% of US organizations are considered, quote, cyber ready to ward off attacks. 45% have a formal cybersecurity strategy in place. Only 2/3 consistently deploy anti-malware technologies. And usually I'm like, oh, that's too low or too, no, it seems about spot on with what I've seen. Trying to convince people they need their own cybersecurity professionals on staff is difficult, especially if they're a small to medium business. But since cyber criminals have been going more after what they call soft targets, those are school districts and things like that, you have started to see more dedicated cyber jobs available. However, that being said, usually their version of a dedicated cyber job means you get everything for the entire department. Cyber incident response. So a cyber incident is an act of violating an explicit or implied security policy. Does not have to be successful. A failed attempt qualifies as a cyber incident, and you can learn a lot from a failed attempt. You can go, okay, this portion of this failed. Why did it fail? What were we doing right that made it fail? What could we do better to make this not happen through this many stages? Or could say they had like 5 steps to be successful and only got through 3. What could we do so that next time they only get through maybe 1? And so they even failed ones are good for us. Any of the following may be considered a cyber incident: gaining unauthorized access to a system or its data, causing unwanted disruption or denial of service, accessing a system for the processing or storage of data, making changes to a system without the owner's knowledge, instruction, or consent. Trying to read through a cattail. Whenever I go to the doctor, they get a little fussy and, Mom, we want to help. Cyber incident response. Set of actions an organization takes in response to a cyber incident. Cyber incident response plan. So I was actually responsible for creating a whole bunch of these because we didn't have any. So if you're a brand new cyber security person, don't be surprised if you're responsible for creating these. Outlines the roles, responsibilities, and processes for responding to an incident. Phases and actionable goals. And these are some of the steps: preparation, equip users and systems to handle incidents as they occur. Identification, decide if the action is a cybersecurity incident that needs immediate response. Analysis, determine how the incident functions, identify affected systems, and gauge the overall impact. Containment, that's usually the one that they really want you to be in charge of there. Isolate the affected systems and prevent further damage. Eradication, remove affected systems from production to eliminate root cause. Recovery, permit affected systems back into production environment. And then follow up, review, and analyze results to improve future efforts. And one thing I always tell people on follow-up, don't be afraid to use those things that you've learned to rewrite your phases and actionable goals. When you first create them, you're kind of creating them in a vacuum with your industry standards. And those are, best case scenario. And you may learn something as you use them to update things that work best for whatever business you're in. So building a cyber incident response team. This can actually be really fun, and it's good to build out the types of people with the types of skills that you want beforehand. The team is the engine behind the cyber incident response plan. It analyzes information, takes appropriate actions, and shares important communications with all the stakeholders. Primary objective of the team: to coordinate and align key resources during a cyber incident to minimize its impact and restore operations as quickly as possible. Objective is accomplished by investigation and analysis, communication, documentation, and timeline development. Team members, team leader, leads and coordinates all incident response team activity, helps the team focus on minimizing damage and recovering quickly from an incident. That's what I was. Because we had a small team, I was actually kind of the one that did a whole bunch of the things for the leadership. So you coordinate for the team leader, your incident response and team activity. You help the team focus on minimizing damage and recovering quickly from an incident. Then you have your lead investigator, which collects and analyzes evidence to determine the root cause of an incident, directs other security analysts to implement recovery. And then you have your communications coordinator, which keeps all the stakeholders informed. Unfortunately, because of what we did, I kind of ended up being all three of those. It's really nice if you can piece those out to other people, though. Documenter. This records all team activities, including investigation, discovery, and recovery tasks, and creates a workable timeline for each stage. Then there's also legal counsel that keeps the team informed about relevant legal issues that may impact the incident or recovery. Now, pretty much all businesses have some form of legal counsel. Like school districts have at least one lawyer or law firm that they talk to. Colleges have that. Definitely hospitals have that. So being aware of that, who that person is, and talking to them beforehand is a good idea. Let's see past that. Communication of security incident. Determining a communication plan, a crucial element of cyber incident response plan. So creating kind of like a workflow of who you need to contact. For example, when I worked for the school district, we had we had building technicians that went out and were in charge of like a set of different buildings, and they had a supervisor. So we had kind of a top down, like I could contact the supervisor and say, I want to talk to your people that are in charge of these buildings, or I have a big incident, I need to pull people in for doing this. Creating like a chart of people so that you know who you need to talk to is a good idea. Reasons for communicating information: it helps eliminate adverse reactions, helps the organization to control conversations surrounding the incident, helps prevent the inadvertent release of information. So usually when there's a security incident, there can be a lot of gossip involved. And sorry, I didn't turn my phone on silent when I came in. There can be a lot of gossip involved and a lot of misinformation. And that can be very bad for your security team. So usually just telling people, hey, this is, telling them this is how we want to communicate about it. This is what happened. This is the, you don't have to be like, this is what you will say. I'm not a big fan of politics in general when it comes to workplaces and things like that, but you have to be aware that there are some things that cannot be talked about when it comes to things like intellectual property and things like that. So that's where talking to your legal counsel comes in mind. So talking about the basics of an incident, or if someone's gossiping, saying, hey, if you want the facts about that, you can talk to, and then telling them who to actually talk to. Satisfies state legislative mandates. Disclosing based on legislative requirements. State legislative mandates regarding communication must be satisfied. Reporting requirements. State legislation that mandates organizations to notify users of cybersecurity breaches. And those usually have you must notify these users in this amount of time. Meets federal regulatory requirements. It's the same kind of thing. Disclosing based on regulatory requirements. Several federal regulatory requirements mandate communication in the event of specific cyber events. There's also certain federal agencies, depending on what you have, that you have to speak to. There's also, if you're dealing with anything that has to do with law enforcement, local law enforcement, you might have to discuss things with as well. Best practices: limiting communication to trusted parties, using a secure method of communication. So if you're, by that they mean, be aware that people will copy things. Especially if you're not talking between trusted parties. And one thing that I always tell people is assume your email is not secure unless you're using end-to-end encrypted email. Being transparent, but careful. Focusing on what is being done, providing a context, responding quickly, using social media appropriately. That one is a big thing nowadays. And a lot of places have a communications coordinator that does nothing but public communications. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, which of the following is not a communications best practice strategy? Contact local news media before the word leaks out. Use a secure method of communication. Be transparent but careful. Provide a context. Best guess here. Anyone? Oh, nice, Mike. There's only one of them that wasn't talked about. No, there you go. It's not a good idea to drag the news media in unless it is a really, really bad incident and it's already managed to get out. But usually, at least when I've talked to communications experts, unless you have to, a lot of them avoid talking to news media because news media are taught to sensationalize. It's just kind of part of their job. Coordination with stakeholders. You guys can't hear that cat meowing her face off, can you? Yeah. Ah, good. I was hoping she was far enough away that my microphone couldn't pick her up. I have a cat that likes to just randomly meow. Her name is Meep for a reason, M-E-E-P. Sometimes she just likes to give me little concerts. Involves coordinating with internal and external entities, stakeholders who are part of the organization and those who are outside of it. Internal stakeholders can be categorized into two role-based groups. Technical stakeholders, responsibilities include identifying and then reacting to cyber incidents. Management stakeholders, public relations, department that addresses the public to minimize negative publicity. Human resources, department that manages human assets. Legal, department that handles legal matters to ensure compliance with laws and regulations. And then your senior leadership, which comprises your executive level managers. External stakeholders include things like regulatory bodies, entities responsible for providing regulatory oversight that must be informed in the event of a cyber incident. If you do not inform them, usually it will cause some sort of a kick-in, like financial incidents or fees, fines, or all sorts of other things. Other external stakeholders, law enforcement agencies, and there are other incident response providers that can be involved. Law enforcement agencies, affected parties are reluctant to report cyber incidents. Identifying threat actors is difficult for domestic law enforcement agencies and rarely leads to arrests or convictions. Investigation may impede the organization from resuming normal operations. Reporting an incident may cause its occurrence to become public knowledge and affect the reputation of the organization. The advantages of reporting a cyber incident: law enforcement agencies can work with foreign counterparts to stop organized cybercrime gangs. Resources and experiences of large federal law enforcement agencies can make the internal investigation easier. Companies reporting to law enforcement can help provide information toward intelligence sharing efforts. Many law enforcement agencies stress that a business might have the missing piece of a jigsaw puzzle that can be used to help capture repeat cyber criminals. One thing I would like to add, depending on your business, the type of information that you find, and also you have to remember, one of the things we talk about a lot is ethics. We as cybersecurity professionals are ethically bound to turn certain things in, whether or not our bosses technically like it. If it's against the law and we're being told to cover it up, that makes us culpable. I personally would rather get yelled at for turning something in than have someone say later on, I can sue you for this, because saying, well, they told me to, is not a, viable defense. Yeah. Having your boss say, la, 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 I can't hear you, is not really a viable defense. And if later on, you can bet that if that person told you, I'm telling you to do this, that they will be like, well, I didn't, unless you have it in writing, that person's probably going to throw you under the bus. If they don't have ethics, I wouldn't count on them to ethically protect you in the first place. Incident response providers, third parties. Oh, hello, Meep. You decide to come next to the computer? Are you going to meep at it? She's thinking about meeping at us. Incident response providers, third parties that assist an organization affected by a cyber incident. Litigation, area of specialization. So there are incident response providers that do nothing but help when it comes to litigation. You're going to be quiet now. She says, I'm going to call you a liar. Meep, meep, meep. You going to come over? She says, no, I'm just going to sit right outside of camera range. I'll have to take a picture for you guys so you can see who I'm talking about. Critical data types. Okay, so data type description, examples, and reason for high value. So PII, I do a lot of talks about this. Personally identifiable information. This is data that could identify a specific individual. There are examples, so full name, social security number, driver's license number, bank account numbers, passport numbers. They can be used by threat actors to steal the identity of a user or conduct financial transactions in the user's name. Now, something else that I also talk to people about when it comes to PII, sometimes you will get pieces of PII. And I always tell people that 3 pieces together are enough to create a trail. It's just like when you think about triangulation, and those 3 pieces, you might have like this piece of the full name and a partial address and this, and that is enough with basic internet record searches and things like that to find a person. And physically finding a person is also a definite threat with PII information. So one thing I always stress like that is 3 or more pieces of linking PII are dangerous. Sensitive personal information, SPI. This is information that does not directly identify an individual, but is related to an individual and communicates information that is private or could potentially harm an individual should it be made public. Biometric data, genetic information, sex, political party affiliation, and union membership. Same thing with this stuff. If you combine it with some of the other things, it might be enough to triangulate who the real person is. Inferences can be made about the data and applied to the individual to place the individual in a specific, quote, category that may or may not be accurate. Personal health information, PHI, also called protected health information. It is the information as it relates to a person's health data, transactions, and history. Mental health history, healthcare services used, and remember this, payments for healthcare services. Those payments, you run into 2 things, the payment card industry standard, and then you run into the HIPAA laws. Another problem there is a lot of those payments have tags on them as for who the payments are for. So again, triangulation. Federal HIPAA laws require many of the key persons and organizations that handle PHI to have policies and security safeguards in place or face fines. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. When I originally started in cybersecurity, when it had things to do with billing, they could send straight encoded billing information. When HIPAA was put in place, they were required to switch to systems that chunked it up and sent billing information and everything else in packets, but they were sent in non-sequential ways. They had to switch their server, medical servers and everything else because of this information just being able to pluck it out of the stream if it was in an order that they could piece it together with the person. With the new HIPAA laws being put in place, I was actually working with our student health services when they had to put these in place, and I got to take the classes and help teach people how to do this. So I got to see how the billing systems actually worked, and it was really interesting. So what they did was they had to do end-to-end encryption, chunk it up into packets, and then randomly send the packets, so it was that much harder for it to be in there. But yeah, basically they have to decrypt it. They have a special system on each end to send and receive. They're proprietary, and they had to figure out who was the best one, and just like you would anything else with security. And then on each end, you'd send it to your provider, and then once they got it, the system would take the information as it was sent and then put it in the right order, and you could actually read it. It was really interesting. So they really do take it very seriously. Financial information, storage, processing, and transmission of information related to financial transactions. For an individual, it could be transactions initiated with a credit debit card, while for an enterprise, it may be detailed accounting data in electronic or paper format that supports financial statements. So examples: names, card numbers, expiration dates, card verification value, the CVV, that 3 little numbers on your cards for individuals, ledgers, journals, spreadsheets for enterprises. The reason this is a high value is the loss of data could result in fraudulent purchases by a threat actor in the cardholder's name, while loss of accounting data prevents an organization from providing stakeholders an accurate picture of its financial health. So when we talk about that confidentiality, integrity, and availability, this hits your integrity. If they have issues and they're like, oh, we're not sure if this is actually our data. Yes, purchases of purses, depending on what they do. Intellectual property. This is a very interesting topic if you ever want to get into it. Creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs, symbols, names, images used in commerce, trademarks, copyrights, and patents are examples. They serve to uniquely identify the organization to the public, so any compromise would seriously impact brand recognition and revenue. Now, intellectual property laws in the United States are drastically different. Please don't get in a fight on my shoulder. Thank you. Are drastically different in the United States than they are in other countries. So if you ever want to see something interesting, look at our intellectual property laws versus even Australia. They're very different there too. HVA, high value asset information. Information that is so critical to an organization that the loss or corruption of this information or loss of access to the system would have serious impact to the organization's ability to perform its mission or conduct business. Assets, systems, and data sets that contain sensitive controls, instructions, or data used in critical operations, or that may house unique collections of data. The reason this is of high value is the direct exploitation of the data can cause a loss of confidence by the public in the organization. Now, if they're a publicly traded organization, that directly is linked to their stock prices, and you can literally watch those just drop. Corporate information, data that is confidential to the organization, such as that used to support the consolidation of companies or assets through various types of financial transactions, mergers, acquisitions, consolidations, tender offers, purchase of assets, and management acquisitions. Examples: discounted cash flow, replacement cost, enterprise value to sales ratio, and price earnings ratio. The unauthorized premature disclosure of this information could have a severe impact on an organization, such as preventing a merger or acquisition from occurring. So a lot of time when they talk about insider trading, sometimes they have information like this that they are privy to, that they are not supposed to be sharing with someone else, that allows them to know, oh, I need to get rid of this stock or purchase this stock because I have like a big merger coming up or a big acquisition coming up. So that's part of what they're talking about. Okay. Viola is examining data that was compromised during a recent attack. Into which category would a passport number be classified? PII, PHI, SPI, PUI. Yeah, it's PII. So if you think about passport numbers like social security numbers, that's the closest thing that I can link them to being like. But yes, COPE, but yeah, they're PII because they're closest to like a social security number. In fact, before I get on to that, one thing I don't know if you guys know, and the only reason I know this is because I've taught classes in social engineering and how to recover from identity fraud and things like that. And a lot of people are not aware that if you have had someone steal your social security number, you can now get a new one if you have to. You have to have a police report, which really isn't that hard to get. You just put in a police report and be like, here's the example of how my identity was stolen. And then they actually have a web page for it. And I mean, that when I was younger, that was not a thing. I'm not sure when that came up, but I'm glad it did, because I've seen several people who have gone through this, and I'm really glad that they offer that option. So if you have your identity stolen, or if you know someone that's had their identity stolen and they know for sure that their social security number has been hijacked, they can put a police report in, and they can go out, and there's a website that walks them through it, and they put that police report in, and they can get themselves a new social security number, which I think is fantastic, because once it's out there, it's out there. It's going to get sold, traded, it's done. So I think it's a great thing that they have that option now. Classification of threats. So this helps in identifying high value threats that must be immediately dealt with, setting aside lesser value threats until high value threats have been mitigated. One effective means of classifying threats is to use the Johari window. Helps compare threats versus unknown threats. Helps compare the knowledge of threat actor to security personnel. Incident response procedures. Okay, these are your steps. Preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication and recovery, post-incident activities. You're going to hear that over and over and over again. This is one of those slides that you might want to make note of. Preparation. Yeah, it is kind of like a pest checklist, exactly. So one thing that I actually did was when I was doing the incident response list, I literally created a Google Docs sheet that was a checklist. Torty cat. Yes, a grumpy torty cat. Grumpy torty cat is so picked on. Key to a rapid and thorough response is really good preparation. Activities include documentation of procedures. Okay, so personal pet peeve here. I was jokingly called the documentation diva when I first worked for the help desk at ISU, because I was the only one that actually documented everything. And when I went in and said, look, you guys don't actually have all your procedures documented, so it makes training people super hard because everyone trains them different ways. And so unfortunately that meant, oh, guess what, we get voluntold for this project. So documentation cannot be stressed enough. If God forbid something happens to you and you don't document, the person after you has no idea what you were doing. If you leave for another job, person after you doesn't have any idea what you were doing. If you're on vacation even, it can be very frustrating. So having good documentation for pretty much everything is a must. When it comes to incident response though, creating basically a manual is a good idea. I used Google Docs just because it was really easy and you had it all online. You could share it. I created an online knowledge base. I had an online checklist for people. I tried to make it as easy as possible for everyone to access, because I don't think when you create documentation, it shouldn't be secret. If you create documentation, it should be good. Other people should be able to read it. They should go, hey, on page such and such, this doesn't make sense. You shouldn't be heard about them correcting your documentation. Okay, off my soapbox. Okay, documentation and procedure. Question? Yeah, okay. All phases of incident response should be recorded clearly and revised regularly. Training, all personnel involved should receive adequate instruction and coaching. Testing, all components of incident response preparation phase should be assessed to uncover any existing weaknesses. So, and you should do that, well, I would say ideally you should do that bi-yearly, so every 6 months, but at least yearly. Detection and analysis. Security professionals can accurately analyze events and then determine a response by relying on their experience and training, collaborating with other security personnel, handling every situation in a similar fashion. Yeah, they say similar, but that's just so that you can keep track of everything. However, knowing that not every situation can be held exactly the same formulaic way is also that part of that creative human thinking, so be aware of that. Using educated judgment. See, it involves the following: confirming the occurrence of a cyber incident, determining the severity of the incident, prioritizing a response to the incident. Confirming the occurrence of a cyber incident is a challenging task because of the inaccuracy of security indicators. Every alarm may not be the result of a security incident. So you have our false positives and false negatives. So sometimes you might be like, that looks terrible, only to realize, that's not even a response that we want. Multiple indicators. Number of indicators may amount to hundreds of thousands on a daily basis. Lack of multiple clear symptoms. Threat actors try to hide evidence of their actions. This is that where I talked about creative thinking and seeing patterns. The more you see symptoms, the more you're like, wait a minute, I seem to remember last time we had this was also going on. So the more you see it, the more you'll see some of those symptoms. Faulty human statements. Employees often attribute reports of a device acting erratically to computer virus. That is absolutely true. When sometimes it's, well, I'll give you an example. I got the funniest call, and you'll laugh when you find out what it was. They thought that they had a student that hacked their smart TV. So they went from using projectors, and it was, I think this is the first year they had them in, to using those touch TVs. And, the computer had to talk to the TV. And there were a couple of fairly decently smart students that figured out that they could get in there if the teacher didn't catch the code, or the teacher because there was a spot where the code was projected, and if the teacher wasn't paying attention and left that up there, sometimes the smart students that actually knew how to get in to the codes would just do things to mess with them. Usually it was just like move the mouse around or something. I got a panicked teacher that called me, and she was seeing this like someone was touching on her screen, and she was freaking out. So I remoted in and I looked at it, and I could see those little, it looks like a little touch when someone touches on a screen, it goes boop, 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 and it was like just going nuts. And I couldn't move the mouse. I was having all sorts of problems. So I was like, okay, let's go back to basics. Let's try this. And I said, go do this and this and try this. And I said, I'll stay on the line while you go physically look at the TV, because sometimes there have been problems with the cords aren't plugged in correctly. Someone came in and knocked something in, and what it turned out to be, there was no hacking. There was nothing wrong with the cords. The teacher had decided to drape Christmas lights off of the TV, and they had come down and were touching and tapping against the pressure sensors on the TV. And it kept reading that tapping and freaking out the computer because it thought there was someone up there trying to get touch input on the TV. So all of that turned out to be because of Christmas lights. So you never know what it's going to be until you go through the actual troubleshooting steps. So often those employee attributed reports can be inaccurate. It's just like when they talk about crime shows with the criminal sketches and things like that, where the eyewitness reports being highly inaccurate. It's kind of the same thing when you get a call on the help desk or through something else. They're not a technician. They don't know what it is. They give it their best guess, and sometimes it's right, and sometimes it's very much not. So you don't know. Determining the severity of the incident. It's important to consider the impact of a security incident in the context of security as a whole. It involves eliminating low-level security non-incidents and determining the severity of the remaining incidents. Prioritizing a response to the incident, the most critical step in the process. The security professionals must be able to quickly prioritize events to respond to the most damaging event first. If two events have an almost equal priority, a decision must be made as to the order of addressing them. So in my experience on these, usually there's one that has just slightly enough of an edge over the other, even if that's like physical locality. This building happens to be closer to our responders than this one is. Okay, let's hit this one first and then hit this one. You just need to put it in, it's kind of like the scale of justice thing. You need to weigh everything out, and not so much that you take more time doing that than you do responding to the incident, but prioritize as much as possible to getting things fixed and done as quickly as possible. Because as we all know, people don't like to have things offline for very long. So the faster you can get things fixed, the faster you can explain things, the happier the end user and the stakeholders are. General principles for first level triage. Oh yeah, Vizio. Yeah, we had some of the Vizio TVs first, and no, none of us liked those either. We actually had to buy what do you call them? Adapters to even get them to work. They were kind of a pain. Okay, so principle and explanation. Consider both current and future consequences. Limiting a prioritization to incidents that only have an immediate consequence on the functionality of business system could inadvertently ignore the more serious long-term impact. Consider who will be affected. Often a cyber incident has a much wider impact on one or more other organizations or the wider public at large. Consider the ability to recover. Some incidents cannot be fully recovered from, such as the theft and release of PII information, which cannot be done. So the consideration should be given as to the level of recoverability. So you have two incidents, and one of them has a recovery stage that's going to take months, but the other one has one that's going to take a couple of days. That's the one you're going to want to hit first. Using the principles for first level triage. Each principle can be further subdivided. Example, when considering the ability to recover, consider the amount of effort required. Normal, recovery is possible in a reasonable amount of time with current resources. That means you don't have to order anything extra, you don't have to hire anybody extra. Supplementary, recovery is possible in a reasonable amount of time with additional resources. That's when you have to order extra supplies or people or things like that. Expanded, additional resources are required, but recovery is not guaranteed. So you have to get other people and resources, but you may not be able to recover. Unrecoverable, recovery is to the state prior to the incident is not possible. So you might be able to recover partially, but you're never going to be able to be the same. When it comes to that, and you have, say, an unrecoverable and a supplementary, you're going to do the supplementary first, obviously. Characteristics contributing to a severity level classification, also called scope of impact. A lot of times when you create what they call them, the disaster recovery plans, you remember me talking about that? There is a scope of impact chart that you make so that you are aware of, like, if certain things go down, this is what they're going to impact. Helps in identifying the most serious incidents. Includes the following: downtime, length of time that the incident interrupts the normal business processes. Recovery time, length of time needed for IT systems to be disinfected and returned to normal functions. Data integrity, cybersecurity incident that compromises the soundness of the data. By that, they mean you have no idea if it's actually the same data, if there's been stuff added to it. You have to go through, and sometimes you have to come through. And if you're lucky, you have other data that you can compare it to or data you can roll back to. System process criticality, degree to which impacted systems affect the overall functionality of the entire system. Economic impact, financial impact of an incident. Pretty much every DRP that I've ever done has to have an economic impact section in order to be adopted. All of your management needs to have something like that in there so that they understand just how good or bad things can be. It's not always easy to determine those factors. Sometimes it's difficult to get the information, and sometimes you have so many factors that you can just kind of do a best guess, and that's it. Okay, Kristen is reviewing the impact of a recent attack and found it only caused a seldom used test server to be taken offline for a short period of time. She's decided that this incident does not deserve a high priority ranking. What scope of impact has she used in making this determination? Network importance measure, system evaluation, system process criticality, structural impact. Don't be upset if you can't figure out which one it is. Just pick what you think is the most likely. Yes. Nice, Nick. Secret of NIM. Okay, that deserves some like extra. Nice, Mike. I like it. Come on, guys. We've got one actual try. Couple more. Okay, let's see what they say. System process criticality. So this refers to the degree to which impacted systems affect the overall function of your entire system. And like I said, don't worry, because let me go back here. Sorry. This is what happens when you Good Lord. There we go. Okay. I have a gaming mouse and sometimes I hit the wrong button. Okay. All right, US CERT information impact severity levels. So impact severity level and then the description. No impact, no data impact is known. Suspected but not identified. A data loss or impact to availability is suspected, but no direct confirmation exists. Privacy data breach, the confidentiality of PII or PHI was compromised. Proprietary information breach, confidentiality of unclassified proprietary information such as intellectual property or trade secrets was compromised. Destruction of non-critical systems. Destructive techniques such as a MBR overwrite, master bit record overwrite, have been used against a non-critical system. Critical system data breach. Data pertaining to a critical system has been copied and transferred to an unauthorized remote system. It's called exfiltrated. And if you know anything about spy movies or, when they talk about exfiltrating people, it basically just means removing something. Core credential compromise. Core system credentials such as domain or enterprise administrative credentials or credentials for critical systems have been exfiltrated. Destruction of critical system. Destructive techniques such as MBR overwrite have been used against a critical system. Containment. Designed to keep a cyber incident under control by limiting its impact. Common techniques, removal. This is the simplest, but not the best option. Affected systems are removed from the network, may limit the preservation of evidence. There's no may about that. It will limit the preservation of evidence. Isolation containment technique. Device continues to function while all network communication is directed to a sinkhole for analysis. That may alert the threat actor. Segmentation containment technique allows the affected device to communicate with a command and control system through filtered communication. And then reverse engineering is similar to segmentation containment technique, but the malware is closely examined. I personally love, I think segmentation is one of the best things that we've come up with because it allows you to chop things off and you can shut your network communication for an entire segment off when you have like an infection, and you can always see how things are working if you want to. But if you were like, this whole section is starting to get and then like malware or something that's spreading, and you can just go and shut it off, and then you've got everything contained, rather than the old days when it was just everything gets infected and you're done. So I personally think that's fantastic. Eradication and recovery. Eradication is the elimination of the infection. This occurs after you contain it. Restoration of capabilities and services is initiated, recovering systems back to their necessary performance. Recovery does not mean restoring system back to their original state. There's vulnerability mitigation as part of that, and that includes steps to reduce or eradicate vulnerabilities. So part of it is you go and look and see, how did this get in? And can we patch the holes to make sure this doesn't happen immediately after we turn our production systems back on? Eradication involves physically erasing data from the hard drive. Methods that should not be used: delete, only data pointers are deleted. Format, quick format in Windows, for example, only deletes the organizational structure of the files. Sanitization, data wipe, overwrites the entire drive. After sanitization, the hard drive can undergo reconstruction. Before I go that far, have any of you used any of the DoD wiping tools that they have? There's, when I had a job, a contract job, where that's not the one I'm thinking of, but this one was an older one, so they probably have something else called it now, but they had basically it overwrote to a certain amount of times. It's literally just that fire X. No, this one's not quite that brutal. It had different amounts of times that you could wipe the drive, and then you overwrote the data. The company that I was working for was a big, they did a lot of chemical things, and I was contracted out to them because they built a bunch of new computers, but they had a ton of hard drives that they were reusing. So we had to safely wipe the hard drives, and we had to use this tool. For some reason, it's like, I think it's something or rather nuke and boot is what it's called. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but one of them you overwrite 7 times, but there's one that's called the Gutenberg, which overwrites it 35 times. And so it overwrites 35 times. That one took a really long time. So the Department of Defense, that particular one, they prefer at least 7 times overwriting. I thought that was yeah, they have that on there too. They actually stole it from these guys. So I think I'll have to go look it up after. But anyway, Derek's Boot and Nuke. Thank you, Zach. Yes. I knew it was Boot and Nuke, but I couldn't remember whose it was. But yeah, that's basically all it does. You boot it up, and you just overwrite however many times it's on there. And one of them is like 7 times. So it's used a lot still to this day because it's super light and you can throw it on thumb drives. So after sanitization, the hard drive undergoes reconstruction, installing the operating system, application programs, and data files. Re-imaging can be used, applying a saved image to a sanitized drive. Secure disposal, complete destruction of a hard drive in the event that it cannot be sanitized. So that's where that fire axe, if that's one that does, or I think someone linked the hard drive crunching machine onto the Discord server that I was talking about it, where you just load the hard drive in and crunch it. That's can be used. Yeah, that was Jeff. Okay, yeah. Those are used a lot of the times if it's a really, really bad incident. Reconstitution of resources is carried out after eradicating the malware. Validation is required. There are a lot of people that skip that step, and then you end up doing the whole thing all over again. Involves ensuring that repaired systems will not be susceptible to the same incident again. Okay, Annabelle needs to eradicate malware from a hard drive. What should she not do? Delete the files from the hard drive using quick format. Overwrite the data using sanitization. Use secure disposal as a last resort. Use the Schneider sanitation method. No! Nice, Mike. Couple more. Okay. Yeah, I think we all saw which one that right away, which one was not the option. Steps in the validation process. So there's patching, applying all patches to the operating system and application software, restoration of permissions, reapplying permissions prior to which permission on the compromised system should be reviewed, scanning, conducting a vulnerability scan to identify issues, security monitoring, verification of login communications to security monitoring, and that's ensuring that the system is being monitored correctly. You don't want to stick it back on there and find out, oh, we got a nice big old hole because it's not actually being monitored. Post-incident activities designed to lessen the chance of a reoccurrence by taking corrective actions, involves documenting the event. Most obvious activity is continuing monitoring. Activities include generating indicators of compromise from retained evidence, updating plans and processes, and creating reports. Generating IOCs from retained evidence. Post-incident activities cannot be accurately performed in the absence of evidence retention. IOCs can be used to clean up and identify compromised endpoints within an organization, create and share custom signatures for future detections. Artifacts that can generate IOCs include hashes of executable malware, identification of CNC, that's your control and command, server IPs, domains and subdomains used by threat actors, changes to network traffic levels. Platforms that facilitate the sharing of IOCs include security content automation protocols, structured threat information expression, so that's SCAP and STIX, trusted automated exchange of intelligence information, CAXI, and YARA. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good point, Zach. Malware that gets into your drive firmware. That's one of those ones that you can't even see. You have to like get completely out of Windows and use one of those scanners that's like on a thumb drive or a secondary node. You have to completely get out so you're not in the boot drive, and you have to, they're a pain. They're just as much fun as those the ones that are on the root and the master boot record when they're affected. Updating plans and processes is necessary to avoid future attacks. Often vulnerabilities are introduced into a system due to faulty change control processes. Cyber incident attacks can be used as an opportunity for incident response plan updates. This involves analyzing each actionable goal of the incident response plan in the light of cyber incidents. All right, so here's your cyber incident response plan goal review questions. So you have your plan item and your question. Preparation, did we equip our users and systems to handle the incident as it happened? Identification, were we able to promptly decide if the action was a cybersecurity incident that required an immediate response? Analysis, could we determine how the incident functioned? Did we identify the affected systems? How accurate was our assessment of the overall impact? Containment, did we isolate the affected systems promptly to prevent further damage? Eradication, did we make the correct determination as to how to remove the affected systems from production? Recovery, were our recovery efforts timely? And believe me, your users will tell you on that one. Follow-up, was our review clear and detailed? Post-incident activities, creating reports, and there are all sorts of templates out there for some really good reports. Lesson learned report contains a review of the change control process and updates to the incident response plan. A lesson learned report includes the following: all the weaknesses that were uncovered, details of the changes that were made to address the weaknesses. Incident summary report provides details of the entire cyber incident and answers specific questions. When was the incident first detected? How was the incident detected? How was the incident analyzed? Was the prioritization timely and accurate? Did the proper notification occur? Which containment technique was used and why? Was this the correct technique? How was the infection eradicated? What validations were used? What changes were implemented as a result of the follow-up activities? Okay. Stop the share there. All right. So that was a whole bunch of information dumped on you guys. Do you have any questions about what we went over? Incident response plans. Okay. So tomorrow I am going to record. I'm going to say no for now. If you come up with any questions on this, it's actually something I really enjoy doing. So throw it out on Discord if you have questions, or hit me up on Zoom, whatever you want to do. Tomorrow, lab 5 to 7. We won't use the whole time, but I will be on there playing around on Kali. If you have Kali Linux on your computer already, I'm going to be using a previously installed one on VirtualBox. So that's what I'm going to be playing around with during our lab time. And that way, if you guys want to mess around with it a little bit, it's going to be a light introduction to it. And we will get more into it next semester. This is just kind of some of the defensive information you can do with it. Okay. Otherwise, go do your Cengage stuff and don't forget your reports and everything, and have a good night. Okay.